I stood at the front of the Lakewood Estates HOA board meeting, the air thick with tension, as I slid a worn manila folder across the polished mahogany table toward Linda, the HOA president. Her smug smile, the one she'd worn for months while lecturing me about community standards, froze when she saw the faded county seal on the cover. The room, packed with over 60 neighbors craning their necks to see what was happening, went so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I opened the folder to reveal a 1968 lake access easement, signed by my grandfather, notarized and legally binding, stating that my family controlled the only right-of-way to the lake. Linda had just spent 15 minutes berating me for illegally docking my boat on my own property, claiming the HOA owned the entire shoreline. I watched her lawyer, a wiry man in a cheap suit, snatch the document and scan it, his face turning the color of old milk as he realized the HOA's entire waterfront empire depended on my permission. I leaned back, folded my arms, and let the truth do the talking. That moment, that single piece of paper, was the end of their war against me, and the beginning of mine. Let me take you back to where this all started 3 years ago, when I first moved to Lakewood Estates. I was 42, burned out from a decade in corporate logistics, managing supply chains for companies that didn't care if I lived or died. My grandfather, Tom, had passed away the year before, leaving me his lakeside cabin, a weathered, 2-bedroom place with peeling blue paint, a sagging wraparound porch, and a rickety dock that jutted into a quiet cove on Lakewood. The lake itself was man-made, a shimmering expanse created in the 1950s when the county dammed a river, and my grandfather's lot was one of the originals, a half-acre of pines and wildflowers that felt like a sanctuary. I'd moved here chasing peace. Retirement wasn't the right word, but healing was. I wanted to fix up the cabin, fish for bass on weekends, maybe plant a vegetable garden. My days were simple. Coffee on the porch at dawn, tinkering with my 1980s bass boat, and waving to the old-timers who'd cast lines from their own docks. The neighbors were friendly enough at first, retired couples, young families, a few weekenders, with fancy boats. The HOA was just a nuisance then, sending out newsletters about approved paint colors, or how high your grass could grow before you got a warning. I'd skim them, chuckle at the pettiness, and toss them in the recycling. I wasn't here to stir up trouble. I just wanted to live quietly, to feel the weight of my grandfather's legacy in the creak of the floorboards and the ripple of the lake at dusk. The trouble hit like a slap in the face last April. I'd been out on a weekend fishing trip, camping, upriver with my partner Jen and our old dog Rusty. We came back late Sunday, sunburned and happy, only to find my boat gone. Not drifted, not stolen, gone. A tow truck receipt was taped to my front door, along with a neon yellow notice from the HOA fining me $500 for unauthorized watercraft storage. My boat, a beat-up but beloved 16-footer I'd spent 2 years restoring, had been parked on my dock, same as always. I stood there staring at the empty water, my stomach twisting. The notice claimed the HOA had reclassified the entire lakeside, including my dock, as community property to maintain aesthetic uniformity. I was floored. My dock wasn't some afterthought. It was built by my grandfather in 1964, before the HOA even existed, and my property line extended 10 feet into the lake, per the deed I'd inherited. I called the HOA office the next morning, expecting a mix-up. Linda's assistant, a bored-sounding woman named Karen, said the board had voted to regulate lake access, and my boat violated their new rules. I asked for the legal basis, any bylaw, deed, or county ordinance. She said, "It's policy," and hung up. That's when I knew this wasn't an error. It was a deliberate move, and I was the target. I tried to handle it like an adult. I sent an email to Linda, polite but firm, explaining that my dock was private property, grandfathered into the original land agreement. I attached a PDF of my 2019 property survey, which showed my lot line, clearly encompassing the dock and a sliver of the lake. No reply. I followed accepted. 2 weeks later, I sent a certified letter to the board, quoting their own charter, which limited their authority to common areas like sidewalks, not private docks. The response? Another fine, this time $750, for continued non-compliance. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, a stuffy affair in the community center with bad coffee and folding chairs. I stood during the open comment period, kept my voice steady, and asked for a public explanation of their claim to my dock. Linda, perched at the head of the table like a queen, smirked and said my dock was aesthetic non-conforming and a potential hazard. She didn't even glance at my survey. The other board members, a mix of her cronies and spineless yes-men, shuffled papers or stared at their shoes. The meeting moved on to mailbox paint colors. That night, sitting on my porch with Jen, the lake lapping quietly in the dark, I felt something harden inside me. Not rage, not yet, but a cold determination. They weren't just wrong, they were bullies, and I wasn't going to beg them to play fair. I was going to fight. The shift was gradual, but unstoppable. I stopped sending emails and started researching. My grandfather had been a county surveyor in the 60s, a meticulous man who kept every scrap of paper related to his work. Files were stacked in my attic, boxes of yellowed maps, deeds, permits, and correspondence. I spent nights up there, a single bulb swinging overhead, digging through his records like an archaeologist unearthing a lost city. That's where I found the gold, a 1968 easement agreement between my grandfather and the county, granting our family exclusive control over the lake's primary access point. Lakewood wasn't a natural lake. It was a reservoir, created when the county dammed the river and my grandfather's land, my land, was the linchpin. His parcel included the only legal right-of-way to the water, a deal he'd struck to ensure access when the dam was built. Every dock, every boat launch, every million-dollar lakefront mansion in this gated community relied on that easement to function. Without it, they were landlocked, their views and toys useless. I read the document 3 times, my heart pounding, not with triumph, but with a quiet, burning focus. They'd towed my boat. They'd fined me. They'd mocked me. They had no idea the kind of leverage I was holding. I didn't run to the HOA with my find. That would have been too hasty, and I wasn't playing their game anymore. I hired a lawyer, Carol, a no-nonsense land use specialist who'd been untangling property disputes since I was in diapers. She reviewed the easement, cross-referenced it with county records, and confirmed it was bulletproof, still active, fully registered, and untouchable by the HOA's flimsy bylaws. I paid a surveyor to remark my property line just to dot every I and started documenting everything, every fine, every letter, every condescending word from Linda at meetings. I kept a notebook, time-stamped every interaction, and even recorded a few of her rants on my phone, her voice dripping with entitlement as she called my dock an eyesore. Jen was worried I was losing myself to this fight, spending too many nights hunched over legal books or county archives instead of sleeping. She wasn't wrong. It was consuming me. But this wasn't just about a boat. It was about my grandfather's legacy, about the principle of being left alone on my own land. My neighbors, meanwhile, started giving me the cold shoulder. Linda had been whispering, painting me as the troublemaker, the guy who wouldn't play ball. A few friends stopped coming by for beers. The old-timers still waved, but even they kept their distance. I didn't care. I was awake, alive, fueled by coffee and the memory of my grandfather teaching me to fish on that dock, telling me to always stand up for what's right. The board meeting in October was the culmination of 6 months of quiet work. I'd requested a slot on the agenda, citing property rights concerns, and Linda had agreed, probably thinking she'd get another chance to dress me down in public. The community center was packed, 60, maybe 70 neighbors, some, curious, some hostile, all wondering why I wouldn't let the boat thing go. Linda opened with a 10-minute lecture about community unity, then turned to me, her voice sharp as she accused me of endangering safety with my unpermitted dock. She demanded I pay $2,000 in accumulated fines or face a lien on my property. I let her talk, let her build her case, let the room fill with her self-righteous certainty. Then I stood, walked to the table, and set down the manila folder. The county seal caught the light, and I opened it to the 1968 easement, explaining in a voice so calm it startled even me that my family controlled the lake's only legal access point. Every dock, every boat, every waterfront dream home depended on my permission. I added that I'd filed a motion with the county to enforce my rights, which could suspend lake access for the entire community until resolved. Linda's face went from flushed to ashen. Her lawyer, fumbling with the document, muttered about sovereign easements and adverse possession, but his hands were shaking. The room was silent except for the faint tick of a wall clock and a few nervous coughs. I sat down, my heart steady, and watched the HOA's power crumble. The fallout was faster than I'd expected. Linda resigned 2 weeks later, claiming health issues, but the whispers said she couldn't face the humiliation. The board issued a written apology, returned my boat, and waived all fines. Carol, my lawyer, negotiated a new agreement. The HOA could use the lake access, but only with my annual consent, for a small fee I donated to a veterans charity in my grandfather's name. The neighborhood shifted after that. Some neighbors sent awkward apology emails. Others avoided. Me entirely, but the tension was gone. The old-timers started coming by again, bringing beers and asking to hear the story, their eyes gleaming with respect. Jen and I threw a barbecue the next month, and the dock was full of laughter, kids running around, Rusty chasing sticks. The lake sparkled at sunset, and I'd sit on the porch, my boat bobbing where it belonged, feeling not just peace but victory. Not the gloating kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground. Now, when I drive through the subdivision, some wave, some look away. Either way, the lake is mine again, and nobody's taping fines to my door.